Saludos, it's your host, Gabe Morales. We've been covering Mexican Mafia members over the past 60 plus years. This will be my final episode in the roll call by letters. I'll resume with the V's, starting with Jaime Vago Vega, who is from Hawaiian Gardens. Now, I've talked to some people who said that Vago was a maid carnal, and others say that he was just an associate and was put up for membership, but was denied and got angry about this. And so he started a dropout gang called the 25s, or Pesetas, at the California Institution for Men. This was a faction that was formed to allow former associates and members of the MA who were supposedly wronged by them to have another chance in this prison gang, and incorporated into some of their symbols a black hand also, but they put in the Mayan numeric system for 2 and 5, or somehow show 2-5 as their symbols. Peseta is a 25-cent centavo coin down in Mexico, and so they are housed on excessive needs yards. Don't get it twisted. These guys can be very deadly. If you want to know more about the pesetas and other dropout gangs, you could check out my episode covering that topic. There is Juvenal Kenny Vega Soto out of Ontario Black Angels. He had an E number of 73820. This guy was made MA in the mid-1980s, but I recall talking to an SSU agent who said this guy flew under the radar for a long time, but had major dope connections down in Mexico. He finally ended up getting arrested in 2006 and sent to the feds under BOP number 02546-112. He was housed at the Cannon facility in 2002 in Beaumont in 2022, and is currently housed at the Florence ADX, where he is doing life. There is Jackie Cricket Velasquez out of Pico Rivera. He had an H number of 5992, and I believe was made MA in the late 1990s. I show that he was housed at Corcoran in 2016, but has not been in custody since at least 2021. There was Nico Velasquez, who was a Puerto Rican MA member from La Puente. He got involved in the Clica by at least 1971 at San Quentin, and was involved in the homicide of an individual named John Taylor at Sierra Conservation Center with Aryan Brotherhood member Blinky Griffin in June of 1972. I showed that he was out on the streets by 1976, but then was involved in the murder of Mario Casas with Stump Valencia in 1977. He then was housed at Folsom during the 1980s and was a very powerful figure there. I remember the warden, Robert Borg, telling me that he met once with Nico in his office, and Nico had a pretty nice homemade earring in his ear, and he told Nico to remove that before he entered his office. Nico kind of said something to the effect of, "Do you know who you're talking to?" And Borg said, "Do you know who you're talking to?" Nico took it off, as they had been slammed for many months with the blacks. After the Father's Day massacre, understand that Nico, along with Mo Farrell and Kilroy Roybal, agreed to make peace with the BGF. This was something that Joe Morgan did not approve of. And so my understanding is that Mo was killed, as well as Nico, for several attempts on Kilroy for that movida. Nico was killed on May 17, 1988 at Tehachapi by his cellie, Sleepy Huerta from Huilamas. I've also heard that he was killed for turning Christian, but I tend to believe the previous reason, as this was told to me by Old Folsom Program Administrator Dave Martin in much more detail. There was Gilbert Huero Venegas out of the San Fernando Valley. He had an H number of 28753. I understand he was convicted of a murder in 1989, whereby he was given H number 28753. I showed that he was made MA by the late 1990s at Lancaster, and then was moved to Pelican Bay by 2002, but was released by at least 2012. There's Luis Boxer Venegas out of San Diego Lomas, 26th Street. Understand that he's the cuñado brother-in-law of Cornejo, who's a frequent speaker on another YouTube channel. Boxer had a BOP number of 45264-198, and according to Cornejo, he was made MA by Gat Martinez, but I've heard other people say that neither Cornejo nor Boxer was legit. I've seen pictures of both these guys. They definitely were major players in the feds and were heavy camaradas, if not maid carnals. I showed that Boxer was housed at Florence in 1995 and paroled in 1996. And I understand was killed down in Tijuas in 2005, working with the drug cartels. There's Anthony J.J. Vera out of Monteflores. He had a K number of 77965. And so I understand was made MA around the 1990s or early 2000s. He was housed at Corcoran in 2016 and then later on moved to Mule Creek State Prison, but I show is currently not in custody. There was Frank Quemado Venegas, he was not a Mexicano. However, I mention him here because he was very influential in the late 60s and early 70s wars between the Nuestra Familia and the Mexican Mafia. In fact, on October 4th, 1972, NF members Richard Bullwinkle Medina from Sacra and Frank Diamond Miranda from Fresno were killed at the California Correctional Center in Susanville by Mexican Mafia members Pelon Moreno and Sleepy Betancourt. This was a payback execution for Medina killing M.A. associate Quemado Venegas. Negro Villalba was made M.A. at Old Folsom Prison, as seen here, with several other prominent members of ARTA. He was given C number 17140. He was housed at Tehachapi in 1987, but also came back to New Folsom in 1992, where I encountered him. I believe he came back for some court cases. I believe then he returned to Tehachapi in 1993. He was indicted on a RICO case in the mid-90s and housed in the BOP. A RICO indictment implicated Villalba as being part of the plot to murder Charlie Brown Manriquez, a former Mexican Mafia member who briefly advised director Edward James Olmos' 1992 film American Me. After being indicted, Villalba remained a fugitive for 5 months before he was arrested. He pleaded guilty to conspiring to commit racketeering and was sentenced to 14 years and 8 months in the BOP. He was moved to Leavenworth in 1998 to 2004, and I understand had the keys to at least one facility, but lost those due to violating the reglas. Longtime Emero Rube Soto had the final say on many issues when he was in the BOP, and an example of this was his shunning and shutting down a carnal previously in good standing, that being Negro Villalba, who struck Rube when he was drunk. So Rube had a hit put out on him. While Negro protested Rube's actions, it fell on deaf ears, and he was banished from the MA after several attempts on his life. He ended up being moved to Tucson in 2012, but was released in February 2013. Villalba was sent back to prison in 2014 and 2016 for violating the terms of his supervised release. He was released from the federal prison in 2017. And he turned into more of a drug addict than he was before. He was found having been murdered in a homeless camp in Long Beach in January 2021. He had been shot multiple times in the chest. I personally have no information that the MA had anything to do with that one. And by that time, his past MA status meant nothing. I recall a Huayno Villarreal. I think his first name was Richard, but I do know he was from King Cobras. He may have had a previous B number, but I remember he had a C number of 35024 when he was in the Violence Control Unit, where I worked in the early 90s. And I worked overtime, and we'd screen the mail on graveyard shift. And I remember reading a letter where he told his people that he had just been validated MA and put a smiley face on his huila after that. There was Rodolfo Shaggy Villegas from Lomas, which is in the San Gabriel Valley. He had an F number of 10920, having entered CDC in 2006. I showed that he was housed at Kern Valley State Prison in 2015 and in Corcoran in 2021. And he is currently housed at New Folsom State Prison. There is Felipe Chispas, a.k.a. Sparky Vivar, at 18th Street. I believe he was born in Mexico. Like Güero Caballo, he was a well-respected 18th Street and MA member. I showed that he was a shot caller at High Desert State Prison in 2001, but had a beef with Güero Sherm Leon. And I believe that Chispas finally died around 2007. That's it for the V's. Move on to the W's. I know that one subscriber had commented about the Huizar family. I believe is related to them. And I'm sure knows a lot more than I do. So please feel free to make additional comments on this video. But I do show that there was Arturo Tudi Huizar, a Danny Huizar with a D number of 8280, and I believe some others. And Tupi Hernandez's mom family. I think she was born in 1933. Tupi Hernandez's mom was from Canoga Parque. In 1997, during Tupi's RICO trial, his attorney told the jury that the prison gang, painted by prosecutors as being a single illegal enterprise that engaged in murder, drug dealing, extortion, and other crimes, really doesn't exist, in spite of tons of evidence over the decades to the contrary. She reminded jurors about how members of the MA ignored Hernandez when it came to taxing gangs and selling drugs in its home turf in San Bernardino County. She also cited testimony that some members of the MA talked about killing his mother, Gilberto Huizar, allegedly for meddling in MA affairs. They also discussed the possibility of killing Tupi. And indeed, he was hit on October 17, 1996, at the federal LA Metro Detention Center. There was Charles Chacho Woody Alcantaranas. He had an E number of 95992. Understand that Chacho was very eager to get in the M and caught an assault with a deadly weapon as well as a murder charge in 1990 that gave him that E number. He became heavily involved in MA politics and was one of the hitmen in the Victor Murillo hit that involved Tati Torres that I talked about a couple episodes ago. He ended up being charged in 1999 and was indicted on the 2002 RICO case under BOP number 14943-112. He ended up flipping and was housed at Terre Haute and was released from the BOP in July of 2019. I'll mention a Robert Fat Cat Zapata, who is from somewhere in the San Gabriel Valley. I've heard a couple different barrios, but he had a B number, and most people say it was only an M associate, although I hear that he was considered for membership. He ended up being killed in the summer of 1972 at CIM by a Nuestra Familia member named Daniel Chicken Loza, who was from the Chino Sinners. And finally, we have Anthony Coco Zaragoza from 18th Street, Columbia Little Cycles. Coco considered Francisco Puppet Martinez to be his mentor and even called him Dad. He was involved in several homicides for Puppet in the 1990s as an enforcer and also was said to be making over $250,000 in dope each year. He was indicted on a RICO case and convicted under BOP number 18090-112. He ended up being housed at Lewisburg in 2004 and later on was moved to USP Lee, whereby I understand that he was calling Mara Salvatrucha members things like mierda seca, etc., which got them muy aguitado. And so later on, there was a major hit that went down at Beaumont Prison as retaliation against Mexican Mafia members by Mara Salvatrucha members that I've spoken about in several previous episodes. And so, I can't believe it. That is finally it. We have covered Mexican Mafia members A through Z over the past 60 plus years. Now, I realize there was a few guys I skipped over either on purpose or by accident, so I will be having one more episode just showing their pictures. And I'm going to challenge you guys to identify each individual in the picture. See if you can figure out who they are. I already know who they are, but that should make it interesting for some of you guys that claim to be Emory experts. I hope you've enjoyed this series. I'll be taking a little break in between my next major series on the NF with a few more project episodes that have been on the back burner. And after that, I'll get into the NF A through Z just as I have on this one sometime in December. For now, this is Gabe Morales signing off for Gangsters, Cops, and Politicians.
Open your eyes.
I like to think kind of